Thank you for joining us here on Continuing Forward,
Mhm.
which is the church revitalization and planting initiative of the Anglican Joint Synods. Today we're going to be talking about curacies. I am Father Mark Perkins. I'm a priest in the Anglican Province of America. I'm the APA's representative on Continuing Forward, and I am the chaplain and assistant headmaster of St. Dunstan's Academy in Roseland, Virginia. And I'm joined this morning by Canon Steven Dart, who is the rector of Christ Anglican Church in Carefree, Arizona. He has served as a priest in the Anglican province of Christ the King for 35 years, and he's led the effort to establish four different parishes. He's directed the curacy of three men who serve alongside him in Arizona. Father Darius Gasatura, is that how you say his name, Canon?
Gassitura, yes.
And okay, Father Andrew Hera and Father Ori Schultheis. I know two of those. I know Father Andrew and Father Ori. Uh, good young men. We're joined also by Father Sean McDermott, who is the rector of All Saints Anglican Church in Charlottesville, Virginia. He served there at All Saints as rector for 2 years, curate for 5 years before that, deacon for 1 year, and a layman for 7 years. He and his wife Julie have five kids, and they've been members of All Saints since 2010. Before working in full-time ministry, Father McDermott taught middle and high school Latin in Charlottesville. Father Sean is also my rector, so if I sound groveling, that's why. If I sound groveling towards Canon Dart, it's just because he's a wonderful guy. So, um, anyway, thanks for joining us this morning.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to
So,
be here.
so I want to clarify. We tend to use curate to refer to a priest who is in a period of formation and training, and that is how we are going to talk about curates and curacies this morning. But it's worth noting that a curate simply means an assisting priest in a parish, literally. And so, at All Saints in Charlottesville, our rector emeritus, Father Glenn Spencer, with 40 years of priestly ministry behind him, is listed as curate to Father Sean, which I think is pretty delightful because that's using that other sense. But today's topic is particularly about the formation of young clergy. So, in general, I wanted to start with kind of a basic question for each of you. What is a curacy? What does a curacy look like, and what should it be primarily oriented towards for yeah. Ken and
Go
Dart,
ahead.
do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I think the primary purpose is to allow a time and space in a low risk environment, I would say, for man to begin to explore and exercise the ministry he's been given, and and then a time of apprenticeship to learn how to be a priest, for well a deacon and then a priest. So I think that's the primary thing. It's a season for that kind of apprenticeship and learning.
Yeah, and I would agree with that completely. And Father Mark, just going back to your definition of the curacy, I would add to that every priest is a curate in the sense that every priest has a cure, and that's that phrase of being a cure of souls. Uh, that literally refers to having a care for a parish or a care for a group of people. And so every priest, in that sense, is has a cure, and then even a rector does, right? My cure is the parish. Uh, the way that a curacy then works is this is a priest who's learning that, and in the sense that this is like an assistant, it's learning that in those first few years as he's really kind of what learning his own ministry, as Canon Dart said, that's been given to him, learning both his strengths, but then also I think learning his weaknesses during that time too, in a lower stress environment.
Yeah, I call it low risk because he's not in charge.
Yes.
So if you put a young man in charge of a parish, or if he's, vicar in charge and he's got his own congregation, that's a whole different dynamic than if he's simply assisting the one that is in charge of the place. So,
Yeah, I think that being a curate is probably the best position of the whole church. You get to do all the things in the ministry, and yet the target is not on your back, as Father Glenn used to tell me. And he would encourage me when I was his curate, go teach, go do this, go visit this person, go do that, random funeral that was called in by the funeral home. Go do all of that and learn it and give yourself to these people. And, but also know that I'm the one, Father Glenn would have to be the one who has to hold the responsibility, make all the big decisions, even though that I was in on all of those talks as well. And so the curacy becomes, I think, one of the most wonderful spots of the whole church.
Mhm.
It really is something that is a special place. And I think what people should really strive for, men should strive for, to find good curacies.
Mhm.
On that note, for each of you, um, did each of you? I know I already mentioned in Father Sean's biography that he was curate for 5 years. I guess starting with Canon Dart, did you have a curacy as a young man and or as a young priest? And what was that like? And then how did that, if so, having it or not having it, how did that inform the way you went about forming the curates under you?
So I did seminary training at our seminary, St. Joseph of Arimathea, Anglican Theological College in Berkeley, California. Had a very close relationship with the founder of our province, Bishop Robert Sherwood Morse. And then he sent me to Arizona. I was ordained to the priesthood in 1990 at a small parish in the mountains of Arizona, Holy Nativity. When I went there as a deacon that summer before my ordination, I came under the direction of Father Paul Hewitt, now Bishop Hewitt. And so he had me under his wing for 2 weeks, and then he left for Washington, D.C. And after he left, I had Bishop Morse on the telephone, and that was my experience in ministry. It was a very rough ride. It was Arizona Rodeo, and we also were starting a parish at that time in Father Hewitt. Then Father Hewitt had lit a fire in Scottsdale, so I attended that little congregation, and that eventually would blossom into St. Nicholas Anglican Church. Um, so I did a lot of things for the first time in charge of the whole thing, and my zeal for the curacy program is that there'd be a better experience for other priests that are coming up in ministry.
Mm. That's that is a rough beginning there, and it's something
Mhm.
that I think has become almost though expected by a lot of priests and a lot of men.
Mhm.
I have a very I'm an outlier in the sense where, and this is why I put in the bio, I was a layperson here at All Saints. Went through seminary while teaching, and was ordained to the diaconate and the priesthood. A year after I was priested, I came on full time here, and I was Father Glenn's curate for 5 years, and then took over 2 years ago. And that was seamless in a way. There's also always challenges in that, but it was uh, I got a lot of formation in there, literally serving under him for 7 years, kind of under in a really direct ministerial relationship. And kind of Canon Dart, I've seen the strengths of that, and so I also want to continue that and want to continue that to go on. I think it's a wonderful thing to happen. Father Glenn planned for that for many years.
Mhm.
Before I was priested, we started talking about my curacy, I think 6 years before I was priested.
Mhm.
And then bringing on me on full time here at the church, which the church had never had two full time priests. And so it was a lot of planning, a lot of intentionality had to go into it. Uh, and so I know it's unique, but it was also, I think I've really been blessed by it, and the church has too. And
Mhm.
Father Mark, you can speak to this, but you also went through a very similar process here at All Saints. So I don't know if you want to talk about that then too.
Yeah, I think so. I similar to Father Sean, I was a little behind him on in the program, in my postulancy and seminary. But I spent a number of years as a layperson, went through aspirancy, postulancy, and seminary. Again, about a year behind Father Sean. I was a deacon at All Saints for a year, and then 6 months after my ordination to the priesthood, I moved down to Florida to serve as curate under Father Ralph Waterhouse at St. Albans Anglican Cathedral. Um, and at that time, when I was priested back in 2019, there were some options where I might have ended up going elsewhere. And I did not. Uh, Elsewhere to be either the rector or the vicar of a couple of different places. And I am incredibly grateful in hindsight. It would have been okay. I would have made through like Canon Dart, made it through. Maybe not as gracefully as he did, but I would have gotten through. But I would have made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes as a curate, but the consequences were much lower, as Canon Dart
Right.
said.
That's the
The
key.
other, yeah, the other thing that I think is worth pointing out and thinking through, I was just thinking about this as Father Sean was talking. I had the blessing of being under two different um, priests who were um, very assured in who they were really as clergy, and were therefore not insecure. And I have heard of. I know other priests who had not so positive curacies, and sometimes that's because of the curate, and sometimes that's because of the rector, though, who has insecurities and is concerned about this young guy sort of taking his um, glory or whatever. And I was blessed by both the priests I served under, wanting me to succeed and taking pride in my success and not being in any way sort of defensive or insecure. So I think one of the questions is that we tend not to ask about thinking about a curacy is what does a rector need in order to actually be a good mentor, to actually run a good curacy? We think about what is a curate need, what should the curacy program be, but what are the character traits necessary in a priest in order to run a good curacy? And I say this knowing that Canon Dart has had a number of curates under him, and that Father Sean, having gone through that curacy program, is in fact shepherding Father Kyle Williams through a curacy right now as well at All Saints.
I'll speak to that. I agree. I think the priest needs to be pretty stable in his position and not uh, jealous of an up and comer. Um, I think also it's pretty important, I think, for a good mentor to be vulnerable and willing to show the reality of the ministry. It's not necessarily cut and dry. There's a lot of um, messiness to ministry. So when I began this cure program at Christ Church, we were a year into it, and then our parish was visited by what I call the spirit of confusion. I think it was kickback from the world, the flesh, and the devil on our care program. So things got very strange in the parish. It lasted for about 18 months. And at one time I had two that were in the parish. So Father Gastura and Father Hare were both serving in the parish. And I turned to them and I said, it's going to be a very bumpy ride. I can't, I'm sorry this is happening while you're in your curacy, but we're going to trust God that he'll bring good out of it. And I'll tell you what I'm doing. It may not be pretty, but I'll just share with you what my experience is, and you'll see how I go through a tough time. So that was they got to they got to see that side of it too. And I just trusted that God knew what he was doing, and that was a necessary part of their formation.
It's interesting you say that, Canon Dart, because in Father Sean's story and my own story, the churches that can afford to have curates, who are especially full-time curates, tend to be established and stable, which is good. I'm grateful. And in established, stable, you know, parishes, there's transitions and there can be there were conflicts at my parish that I was able to sort of witness how Father Ralph negotiated through those. But there is actually something. A lot of the curate when they finish, they will these when they go elsewhere, they will often go into less stable parishes
Right.
in the continuum in particular, but also anywhere really. And so it is interesting, I'm sure it was unpleasant for you and maybe not as pleasant for them, for Father Hera and for Father Gastura as my curacy or Father Sean's curacy. But there is something I think really valuable about getting to experience that tumult once again, not being the person where the buck stops, not being the person who is ultimately responsible. There's
Right.
something good about that, it seems.
Yeah,
But again,
that's
I'll just go back to that point where I think I would say, the mentor needs to be a bit vulnerable and show, what they're experiencing.
Canon Dart. You use the word in your first kind of definition of this. You use the word apprenticeship, which is how I've always kind of thought of a curacy.
Mhm.
Um, and part of that's not just like apprenticeship of hearing the stories, even though those are really important. But literally the working through every issue that comes up on a day-to-day basis that are very
Yeah.
specific to that year, that family, this
Mhm.
parish. But then you're able to generalize a lot of those things into, okay, if I move here and I see this person or I receive this issue, I have a baseline to know what to work with. And that's where, would you kind of talk some more about that? Like, how do you see curacies as apprenticeship, and why is it important to view it as that, rather than maybe like in a business model, as in like an assistant, or just kind of you're working the ladder of a structure of a corporation.
Yeah, because it is a craft. So it is a there's knowledge that needs to be applied in a wise way. So it becomes an art. There's an art to ministry. So that takes a while to learn. And I think it's somebody coming alongside, they can see how that's being done, they can participate in how it's being done, they can then do it and and get feedback on how they're doing it. So I think that there are a thousand things we learn through the body language, through the close association, through the heat of the moment, that we would never get in a textbook. You can't learn that off the page, but you can sure learn it in person. So I think that's where it's really useful. And I think too, you might consider not it is an apprenticeship. It's also, you might consider it like a residency. So just like doctors have a residency, they they're there with somebody senior that has experience. They can help them, through the different situations in the medical profession in a way where the physician of souls, so they can see the different things that are presenting and how you manage. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I got a curacy of 5, 6 years, five of those being, I'm here every day. Um, and I thought when Father Glenn kind of finally retired, um, I still had a lot to learn. It's not that it was, Father Glenn put it this way. He said, it's not that, we're done with this sort of thing. It's like, oh, you've graduated. It's that, no, probably the parish is ready, and I'm ready. And then we learned of circumstances with his health that it was providential, right? That it happened in the way that it happened. But a 5 year curacy is, I've never heard of anyone else going through that, like officially, kind of like this is where and that was the plan. That was the plan from day one when I came on. It was 5, 6 years. Um, Typically, I hear about, 2 years. What do you think would be ideal, Canada? You've gone through this a few times. I'm hoping my curate right now never leaves. I'm hoping for
Right.
perpetual curacies. I'm not sure that will happen or not, but I definitely don't. 2 years seems like for me would have been way too short. But there's also our churches need priests, and so where do we find that middle ground? What's your experience?
So I've talked around a little bit, and it seems like 2 years is a good number. I think we need to recognize that vocation is not, we don't have a job where you learn a certain task and then you do the task over and over. Vocation is not a box; it's an upward spiral. You never arrive. So if you're truly pursuing your vocation, you're always on the cusp of a new beginning. So and there's more you don't know. So it's ever expanding. So I don't think we could ever say that the curate has mastered the the art of being a priest in in 2 or 5 years, whatever the time may be.
It's a great way to put it.
I think 1 year is too short. We're asking men to relocate to Arizona, and we've been very blessed with a family in the parish that gave a transformational pledge. We're not a very big parish, but they wanted to give enough to provide a living wage for a man in first years of ministry. So that was transformational. It allowed us to hire another priest on board at a living salary. So we're asking him to relocate. So if you think about a man moving to Arizona with his family, it's going to take a little while to dig in, get settled. Maybe by about 5 or 6 months in, they've got their stride. If they're going to leave after a year, that's a pretty short amount of time. They're already kind of looking, they maybe have 3 months of a sweet spot, and then they're looking to the next place to go. My sister, my wise counselor, she and her husband had hospitality for young families in their home over the years to help them get started. She said 1 year is way too short because you will put up with a lot of that person's not just their idiosyncrasies, but their bad habits. You'll put up with those because it's only a year. If they're going to be there 2 years, you're going to fix it now.
That's a great way to put it.
so, so that's
Yeah.
the 2 years seems pretty good on
Yeah.
our end. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say when I took my curacy, Father Ralph and I said 2 to 5 years, and that was just kind of a big ballpark. It wasn't like we didn't sign a contract or anything. Um, and like Father Sean said, there's always needs. And so I was asked to prayerfully consider a place very soon after I got there that would have had me leaving, about a year and a half in. And there were a variety of reasons it didn't happen. But a big part of it was I just felt like, again, on the one hand, could I have could I have done it and gotten through? Yeah, yeah, sure, for sure. But I had come down to Florida to do something, and for one thing, it took about almost, I would say, you'd have to ask Father Ralph to know. I think it was probably a year before I was at all useful to him. Like, I think I was doing things in the first year to take things off his plate, but I was also putting lots of things on his plate by being there, and he'd have to teach me. And so I think about a year in, I just remember realizing, oh, I think I'm actually helpful in this parish. Like I am giving more to the parish. Again, specifically for Father Ralph, for my rector, I am providing more than I am requiring of him. And so that's not why you do a curacy. You do a curacy to send ultimately. But at the same point in time, if a church wants to flourish as well with a curacy, I wonder if 1 year is even possible. The other thing is that um, there were some folks in the parish who never opened up to me. And one person told me specifically because she said, "You're going to leave. I know you're going to leave. You're not going to stay here." Um, and so I'm not going to invest in that relationship. Now, I think that reflects some problems because ultimately we're in the body of Christ together. And so to say, "Oh, I won't let you in because you're going to leave again," there's something wrong there. But there's something really natural too. It took, I would say, again, with most folks in the parish, after about a year, that was the sort of uh, getting to achieve some kind of um, pastoral connection, pastoral intimacy. And if I'd left at that year, then I never would have actually experienced what it was like to have a real cure, to have a real care for
Mhm.
people's souls as a parish priest. So yeah, I guess the second question. So 2 years, you might take as a standard or not, or you might say 5 years. Is there, like you said, Canon Dart, a curacy does not end because the curate is finished, right? A curacy doesn't end because the curate is now a completed priest, and has arrived. And yet, for me, I will also say that in my third year, I ended up spending 3 years there. There was kind of a sense that it just seemed to my rector, to myself, it seemed even in the parish, there was a sense that I had done the thing that I'd come to do in some sense.
Right.
And for a variety of reasons, it was time for me to move on. I don't, my wife and I had that same, like, yeah, this is the right time. But I don't know why that was. I've reflected on it and haven't really come up with, okay, what is it? There's some things. So how do you know when a curacy, and you said the same thing, Father Sean, the parish was ready and Father Glenn was ready. So for both of you, how do you know? Is it just kind of an instinct, or is there something you can say, all right, this is when we can tell that this curacy has kind of reached its, or do you just, because it's never really finishes, you just say, all right, we're just going to do 2 years and or 3 years or whatever and make a, what do y'all think?
Father Sean.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think in some ways it's hard to answer because the the priesthood and the ministry is also very individualistic, right? Due to the personality, the strengths, the weaknesses of the priest. Um, I do think that there is a competency that one develops, and some guys uh, can gain that quickly,
Mhm.
and some guys it's going to take longer due to a variety of reasons. But that competency also could be a competency within the specific parish. So, where for me, that level was pretty quickly acquired because I had been here for 10 years as a layperson. I knew everyone. And there is
Mhm.
that sort of, that wasn't really a competency of like my own skills or talents. That was just, do I know the people? And can I work with them? And is it natural? That came quicker because I had been here. And so that sort of competency of learning people, learning your cure, learning kind of the intelligibility of the parish. And that all thing I think does come to a point where you start realizing where you're at, who you're with. And I think that is a level that can kind of be attained and hopefully can be attained in that sort of 2 year marker, and then you can really feel like I'm doing work that I know what I'm kind of know what I'm doing in a sense, but not in a way that it's a task. It's not. It's a living. It's not a task. So that's how I would start.
I think too, in my situation, maybe the 2 year, defined term is a bit arbitrary. Um, Part of the blessing we've had is that we've been able to be a pipeline to a placement for the different needs we had in the Arizona parishes. And so that worked out very well for the first two. They were able to move right into parish work. Um, so that may or may not be there, right? And I know that it does give a lot of anxiety to a parish if the young man is training up in the parish and doesn't have any place to land. Like, where's he going to go? Where's he going to serve? That can be a real place of anxiety. And I've told my vestry, that's a diocesan matter. We're in charge of this piece, and then it's going to be a conversation between the man and his bishop where the next place is. And I'm not a bishop. So that's a hard thing, a hard challenge for a parish. Also, a challenge for the parish to say, this young man and his family will be serving in our parish. I want you to love them. I don't want you to get attached.
Yeah, and I think that's it. This is a really great thing for these kind of curacies that move through is that this is a training for the parish, though, too. There's a
Oh,
sense that the
absolutely.
parish
Yeah.
has a ministry towards the curate and a
Yeah.
responsibility towards that. How did you? how did you approach and did you all have to kind of learn that? How do you learn that as a parish with the
No,
first cure?
we're still in the, we've only been doing this for 4 years, so we're still
Yeah,
learning how to do that. And
right.
I'm still telling people, it's a challenge. We're going to love them, but not get attached. And there is, there was, you might call it professional distance or something other, but yeah, we can do this. It's, I also want them to think about, it's, you want your kids to grow up and move out of the house too. So it's not like, it is a maturation process here, and we're going to rejoice when they can go out on, on their own. So that's not a bad thing.
No,
I
and I think what's
also,
cool is that then they take your parish to wherever they're going. There's
mhm,
always the sense that what they learn from your parish, which is a healthy place, they're
mhm,
then going to replicate. And maybe not, of course, in the same exact way, but then your parish and your people get replicated in a way, in a dynamic way, at
mhm,
another parish, which I think is just really cool thinking of like the genealogy of parishes and curacies. And we used to have that a lot more in like in the Episcopal Church, for example,
yeah,
really saying, "Oh yeah, I served under this bishop, and that bishop was under him," and you had a sense of the style, the liturgical phrasing, even, but also the life of the parish and
mhm,
how they worked.
right.
Yeah.
I want to touch on two other things, if I may, Father Mark. When you talked about, how do you know when when it's time? Um, Remember, we're part of the of what I see as essential in the cure program in the curacy is spiritual formation. So I can see the benefit of the formation intellectually in seminary, but then where is the spiritual formation happening? And I see the cure program as essential in that. So what I've done is I've taken each of the candidates through the exercises of Ignatius Loyola in a form presented in a book called Sacred Listening by James Wakefield. We start off in September and we go through Easter. It's tied into the liturgical calendar. It's about an hour a day that they do of meditation on the scriptures, and then I listen for an hour a week to their findings. It's pretty intense and very deep discipleship. But that's essential work, I think. And then also on a spiritual level, and then on the emotional level, we're also looking for maturation there because, like Edwin Friedman will say in A Failure of Nerve, the common denominator of great leaders is they are the least anxious presence in the room. So you really do have to kind of focus in on what are the particular anxieties of the man, and how can those be addressed and resolved so that he doesn't flinch in the crisis. And that's part of the work too. It's not just showing how to celebrate the mass or how to visit the sick. All those things are essential, and we're doing all those things. I'm very happy to introduce the man to do all those things where he'll be celebrating mass, he'll be visiting the sick, he'll be catechizing the youth for confirmation, he'll be teaching Bible studies, he'll be doing administrative work, he'll be doing the grunt work, he'll be taking out the trash. I mean, all these things are, part of the deal. But at the root of it too is also the maturation of spirit and man.
Father Sean, what did that what did that look like in your own curacy or in your work with your curate?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Father Glenn, it was we had a long time, and so there's a lot of things going on during those years that we did, and it changed over time as well because it wasn't as the time period wasn't as defined. But one of the things that we Father Glenn developed for us was a time of really talking through the parish, like going, like literally bringing out our list and just talking through all of the, not just even like the needs or the problems that people are having, but really just what's going on in all of the families of the parish. And then going through that time together, which was almost a daily basis, and then bringing that into our prayers. And that was an extremely important process to learn how to combine this kind of pastoral care with our prayer life in the church. And then for Father Glenn, it meant reading a lot of really, really hard books like Lonergan and reading Maskell and going over and over things and reading articles that he's reading. There was an intellectual continuation with Father Glenn, and he would never let us kind of stop thinking about these things. And I think that played another really big part into matching the culture of the parish as well, because that's what the parish was used to. And so learning that from him and being part of that rhythm of his reading and thinking and questioning became then part of our life here. And that's what we're continuing to do and what Father Kyle and I now do. And when Father Glenn comes and visits, he's not surprised. We're doing the same thing that I did with him.
I want to shift to a little more of a nuts and bolts question. Canon Dart, you alluded to a family giving a kind of transformative gift to fund your curacy. Uh, Father Sean, how is your curacy funded? How are you funding your curate? So how are they funded? And then the second question is how ought churches, parishes, dioceses to be thinking about funding curacies? And how do you know that you are giving what is in a base sense, what is the sort of right range salary wise that you think is necessary for a curate in a kind of general sense?
I can go first on this.
Mhm.
Back when we started thinking through the process, one of the things Father Glenn kept saying was, well, I don't really know if this is going to work. uh, we planned for it and we set out, and I had a living from the school I was teaching at. And Father Glenn said, well, could you come and work at the church full time if we could match that? And so we did have a sense. We had some numbers, and they weren't high. They were, I was working as a middle school, high school Latin teacher at it wasn't like a really great salary. And I said, yeah, we could come over flat and then work our way from there. And then we got all the things in place, and he literally just wrote to the parish and started talking about it and saying, here's my plan. We've never done this as a church, but I think we can support two full-time salaries for the clergy. And that was something that had never been asked. It had not been really talked about too much. And then the church did it. And we've never stopped since. And for a little bit, we were having Father Glenn retire. I was on full time, and we were bringing up Father Kyle as well. And the church did it. And so part of this is asking and really knowing that you don't know sometimes. And I think actually more parishes can do this than what they think. And I would love to hear from Canon Dart his experience, but what we have found is bringing on two clergy doesn't double what you get done. It triples, quadruples it. Not in the sense of like work getting done. That sounds too task oriented, but like the presence that we have, the way that we're able to support the parish, it is way more than just doubling the work of what Father Glenn was doing. And since the time that I've come on, we have grown at a rate that we never saw before, every year consistently. And I think that's part to having full-time clergy and more than one.
Mhm. Yeah, I think in our circumstance, we in our parish history, we came into a crisis point in the downturn back in the Great Recession. Arizona was the epicenter for the housing collapse. And we had a financial crunch in the parish that brought me to my knees. And I said, we can't solve our problem on the human level, so let's go to God and ask Him to solve it for us. So we instituted the 9 days of prayer. And over 3 quarters, we came out of a massive debt and in the clear. So we do that every quarter. We pray for 9 days, 9 masses in a row, make our petitions known. I think this transformative gift came out of those petitions. We're praying that God will, in thanksgiving for His abundant provision, and that God will continue the same for a vibrant ministry in this holy place, is the petition. And then other prayers and intercessions, as necessary. We had, living wage in the way that we worked it out is I want the man to live within 20 minutes drive of the church. We kind of live in a high rent zip code, or the church is in a high rent zip code, and we're a commuter parish anyway. So, we started out with figuring that it would be a salary in Arizona around 60,000 a year, and then we were able to bump it up from there. I was interested in the curate having a good base salary coming out of his curacy, because where he goes next, that can become the starting point for his negotiation for salary. And it does set kind of a high expectation. It's kind of a it did raise some eyebrows, in the amongst people that are working in the ministry. But I think if you set the expectation, people can lift up to it, and it can be done. I agree too that when you have the presence of more than one priest in the parish, you do expand. There's a synergistic effect, and you can really expand out ministry. So we've experienced that as well. God is faithful. He's blessed it, and I think too there are outside resources. We shouldn't just think it's just our parish only. I think the diocese province structure lends itself to the supporting young men in ministry, and this should be seen as part of their formation. It's for the long haul and longevity of these structures. So I think it's an essential ingredient. There's also gifts outside. I have a colleague, a former colleague who's now with the ACNA, but he was able to get a grant from the the Lilly Foundation, and they have Thriving Congregation something or other. I can't remember the exact name, but they got a grant for this kind of apprenticeship. So it came from a foundation into their parish. So there's money out there.
Yeah, we're looking into that as well. That's one of these things that we're looking into, is how do we keep this as the forefront. Father Kyle is here for for the long term. Is our plan. Who knows what might happen? But we're already kind of looking. Well, then how do we create a rotational curacy that actually comes here for 2 to 3 years and learns this parish and is able then to leave?
Mm-hmm.
That might be a little bit too much for our parish to be able to handle all together. And so we started looking into other funding sources, and that's the one we're starting to pursue that. And in the just reading through their materials and seeing how they can match with what we might want to do. But there are other places for that. I also think, thinking creatively on the diocesan level too, of how we can support these structures of these really important kind of 2-year, 3-year curacies through funding that comes in on a diocesan level, and then marking out churches like yours, Canon Dart, of being those set places. We already have them, and this guy is going to be up in a year, so we're going to, here's our next one in the pipeline, and we can plan it out. I think that's a very important thing for us to do at a diocesan level with the parishes too, to try to replicate where things have been successful. Well, then let's keep doing that, and let's find those places, and then let's send guys there in order to do those curacies.
Yeah.
And I hope also then other churches will start seeing that it's possible.
Yeah.
It really is possible. I think if a church has, 80 to 100, or definitely over 100 people, they can probably find a way to support 2 priests. It's there. And that's when then we can create these spots and then actually have places for men to go to learn.
Right. I think you need to be creative too. I had, years back when Father Gastur was in seminary, we had a woman in the parish that needed to move within 3 months. Her mother was ailing in the Midwest. And I challenged her and said, if the parish surrounded you, she was a widow, and helped you move out, would you consider tithing off the sale of the proceeds of your house to help Father then, seminarian Gassitura? She said, absolutely. That she got excited about that. So
Yes.
that was about 6,000 to the good there. That was a big push. And that gave momentum to another family that was here for a season. Then they were off to Dallas. They'd been here 6 years, and in that time there was a run up in the housing values. So I said to them, "Would you consider a tithe? You know, it's been done in the parish. Would you consider a tithe off the proceeds of your house?" And they said, "Absolutely." And then months later, they came a check for $36,000, and that was well, already we're gathering some steam here. And and then the family that gave the transformational pledge, they were like, you know, we see what's being done. We want to, you know, really increase that. And so they've really leaned into it in a big way. Then you also need to consider the possibility of planned giving. So the same family has made you know arrangements for their trust to bless this kind of effort going forward, and you know continue the work. So the old saying is, when there's a will, there's a way. So we need to get people in the ethos of generosity in the parishes. Are they being good stewards of what God has given to them? Are they doing that now, and are they considering expanding the kingdom out with a bequest? And we need to be intentional about that, educate people, and make that possibility known, because they're you know we're looking at a generation now, the baby boomers, and as they you know as they hand off their wealth to the next generation, it'll be the largest transfer of wealth in human history in this American generation, and there's a lot of opportunity there for kingdom work if we know how to position ourselves and educate people.
Yeah, in my experience, and there are many exceptions to this, but nevertheless, clergy are not, as a rule, good about asking for money, um, and are uncomfortable with that kind of a posture. Not always. There's many exceptions, but often, and I find that a little bit strange, to be honest. I say that having been formerly that way. Um, but you're asking people to do something that the Lord commands them to do, which
Right.
is to give money. And you for the support of the church. You're asking them to do something that is so it's required by God. So it is part of your job as a priest to proclaim what God requires. It's good for their souls to give money away, right?
Yes.
That is practice combating mammon, and it's necessary for the church to do the work that the church needs to do.
Yeah.
So, in every single way, I think clergy need to, this is a conversation for another time maybe, but they need to get comfortable asking people for money and asking people specifically for money. That's a sort of necessary part, I think, of priestly ministry. It's also the case, I think, that sometimes you can say, well, when our church budget gets to a certain point that we can support a curate, then we'll bring a curate in. But that's exactly backwards, just as Father Sean was
Yeah.
saying.
Right.
It is you can't be naive or foolish or foolhardy, but people will only support a vision that you cast. People will not give to help you have the vision. Does that make sense? People will not give money so that you can see what you're supposed to be doing. You, as the priest, have to say, this is what we're doing. You have to put something worth supporting in front of them. I was talking to a very successful fundraiser, or a very competent, I think, fundraiser, and we were sort of comparing notes about having raised money, me helping St. Dunstan's raise money, and I was surprised by how little he had raised for he's the president of a particular nonprofit. I was surprised by how little, and it was just he said, "Well, that's all we need right now. I've got great vision, so in 3 years I'm hoping to do this, but right now I need this amount of money, so that's what I raised, and when I need to raise more, that's what I'll do." And it was a realization that the limit on his fundraising was not the amount that he could raise his existing pool. It was the size, it was the particular, not size, because it wasn't as though he was lacking vision. It was the particular kind of vision he was casting. And so you will only ever get the money that you ask for the vision that you cast.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that every parish can just magically raise that money or anything like that. It just means that you're never going to get there unless you start casting the vision for what you want to do. Um, two
Can I
other
speak,
sort of good.
can I speak real
Yes.
quick to this? Part of the work I've done with these curates is to make sure that they tithe, right? So this is the discipline. They should be praying the daily office. They officiate that on Zoom. they pray the daily office, they should be a penitent, and so they make their confession regularly, and they should tithe. So they should already be a sacrificial giver so they can preach with conviction what it means to be a sacrificial giver. And then I also put them in charge of the stewardship campaign. So they write the letter to the parish. They preach the day of the stewardship day. They hand out the card that has the commitment for the next coming year. They write the thank you note. They follow up. So I want them to be very comfortable with that because that is kind of a necessary part of what we do. And I'll speak in my priestly formation with Bishop Morse. I was very blessed that he gave me the ability to ask without reservation for support for God's work. And he told me of his experience raising money for a York school in Carmel, California, a private school. And he was raising money in San Francisco with some very big dollar people. And so over a 3 martini lunch, he was apologizing that he was going to have to talk about money. And the man stopped him and said, wait a second, you're going to do something good with that, aren't you? He said, oh, yes. He said, well, tell me about that. What do you, if you raise money for me, what are you going to do with that money? So he started talking about the school. He got all animated. He was, full of the vision for the school. And the man said, you really believe in this, don't you? He said, oh, yes, I do. He said, well, you should never be ashamed to ask money for what you believe in.
Yeah, when I was transitioning to work for St. Dunstan's and knew I was going to be fundraising, I was explaining to a very successful school leader who had raised a lot of money that I was just uncomfortable with it. And particularly, I was uncomfortable. I was going to ask a couple of parishioners, if they would consider supporting it. And he said, "Didn't you preach a few weeks ago about the passage on mammon? And you talked about how important and valuable it was to practice almsgiving. Did you mean that?" I said, "Yeah. Of course I meant that." He said, "Do you think that St. Dunstan's is a good idea? Like, is it worth doing?" I said,
Right.
"Yeah. Yes." He said, "Seems like you have a problem that's you. Like, seems like you need to get over your whatever it is that is keeping you from asking for money." That was a really important conversation for me to realize, oh yeah, this is and moving from a posture of, gee, I feel like I'm inconveniencing you, to we're doing incredible work here for the kingdom of God, and you get to be a part of it. You don't have to be, but I'm offering you an opportunity to be a part of it. And if you don't do it, we'll get there somewhere else. As we've always said, God has always given us what we've needed when we've needed it, and you can be a part of it or not, and that's okay. God may be calling you to do something else entirely with your money, but moving from a posture of sort of need to a posture of opportunity is just a really it is a more accurate picture of what money does in the kingdom of heaven.
Yep.
I'll just say two other quick things related to what Father Sean was saying. I think if you realize that your parish needs 2 clergy to thrive, uh, then what you're looking at is different than a sort of sending curacy potentially. And your
Mhm.
parish needs to figure out how to support 2 clergy, because that's what you ought to be doing. But if you're looking at a sending curacy, a curacy that is really, it benefits the parish, but it's really for sending elsewhere, I think that's where, in particular, it makes sense. This is what Father Sean was talking about. This is what Canon Dart was talking about. To look to the diocese and to look to foundations like the Lilly Foundation. There's also one called Made to Flourish, I think is what it is, that can support curacies. It makes a lot of sense to look outside the parish because, yes, the parish should be supporting part of that because that's part of the mission is to be a sending parish, right? But it makes sense in those cases, I think, to look for partners who are outside the parish as well to help
Yeah.
make ends meet. Quickly, we're kind of running out of time here, but I'm curious, shifting gears a little bit again. Um, do you think there is a difference? So there's a difference between a curacy that is really for the purposes of the parish because the parish needs 2 clergy versus a sending one. In that latter category, a curacy that is meant to send men out every 2, 3, however many years you make the curacy. Does it make a difference whether you're training a curate to take over a parish, that's to take over a stable parish, or to take over a parish that needs revitalization, or perhaps to plant a church? Does a curacy need to look different, or is it kind of the same work in each case, and no matter where he ends up going?
Father Sean.
Well, you're the one doing that one, Canon Dart.
Yeah, so
I,
I haven't really. I would think that the skill set would be applicable in wherever they go, right? So you're looking for spiritual maturity, emotional maturity, certain proficiency in the priestcraft. Now they can go out to their next assignment. Yeah, I think if we had a sense of what the placement was going to be, we there could be conversations that pertain to the next setting. But I think a lot of what they would learn and experience in the parish in those 2 years would be applicable in any circumstance.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is just building that relationship so that um, when they have a question, they're calling Canon Dart that day. That's the key thing. I think not many people realize how lonely the priesthood is.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been really blessed to be surrounded by some clergy here. We have some
Right.
retired clergy, um, as well as Father Glenn. But most guys do not have that opportunity, and it's very lonely. And so you have to have the people that you can trust and you can talk about anything and really go through it. And so I think that's the big thing is all the situations are going to be different, but every parish is entirely different. And so the context matters a little bit less than rather building the maturity and the connection with a mentor that you continue to do. And Father Glenn does not get off easy. I still call him, and he has to talk to me because he talked to me a lot. So it now goes back, and it's been extremely helpful.
Yeah, that's one thing I would exhort rectors who are looking and thinking about curacies is to not to view it as strictly related to the time when the curate is present at your parish, but to recognize that that is a relationship that should continue afterwards in a
Oh,
mentoring way. And
absolutely.
you
Yep.
should be a resource after your curate leaves. Um, is there anything as we're sort of wrapping up? Are there any thoughts that you've had that you'd like to share, or any other comments that you think would be edifying for rectors, for men in discernment, for parishes to consider?
Yeah, I would like to encourage other priests to lean into this work. I think they really need to hand off their vocation to another. If you think about the ember days, we might consider that we've already built a fire, right? Or you might consider the priest as a hot burning coal. Let him pass the fire to another. Let him heat another, pass on that light and heat so the fire keeps going.
Yeah, and I would encourage parishes that way more parishes can hire a curate, and they can do that, and that can be in a sense the parish's missionary fulfillment, right? Of keep pushing other men into the ministry of reconciliation and let them go out too to continue that, and your parish becomes the mother church, right, of that new parish. And it's just a wonderful thing. So I would encourage a lot more parishes to step up to the plate and hire a second person or offer the job and see what happens. And who knows who might come up. And then for the priests themselves to look inside their own congregations to see who in consult, who could they ask to seek after vocations to be there, maybe not even to send out, but to really be there at the parish.
Amen. Thank you, Father Sean. Thank you, Canon Dart.
You're welcome.
Do continue to follow us on YouTube and check out our website at continuingforward.org. Thanks for being with us today, and look forward to the next time.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.